Did you know before Real Madrid ever made history and achieved the unthinkable, winning 3 Champions League titles in a row and becoming the very first team to ever do so, their bitter rivals FC Barcelona could have very well been the ones to have first claimed that title, instead of Real Madrid and their supporters holding the pride of such a momentous achievement? A few seasons prior, Barcelona could have, and realistically should have, done it first. It would have definitely changed the matrix of debates and comment sections online, if it happened. And they were so close. Let me explain why. Because in the 2008-2009 season, Pep Guardiola's very first year in charge, Barcelona didn't just win, they ripped Europe apart. They made Spanish football history with their iconic treble, dominating La Liga, breezing through the Copa del Rey, and defeating Manchester United 2-0 in the Champions League final. 2 years later, in the 2010-2011 season, they would once more return to the summit of football greatness, being crowned La Liga champions, winning the Spanish Super Cup, then going on to once more defeat Manchester United at Wembley to lift another Champions League trophy. But sandwiched right in between those two peaks was the rather awkward 2009-10 season. A season that should have made history, but regardless of its success, instead ended up becoming a strange, dramatic, and relatively disappointing chapter. So I guess this is kind of a story about how locker room tensions, drama, and overall chemistry can really affect a team, no matter how good or how much talent they might have. But in order to truly understand it all, you really need to look back 2 seasons prior. The summer of 2008 was a time of upheaval at FC Barcelona. Frank Rijkaard's final 2 seasons had seen the team's edge vanish. Many veterans' disciplines had seemingly eroded and training intensity had dropped. Perhaps all of Barcelona's success had turned the once hungry squad into one that settled for complacency. So when Pep Guardiola arrived at the age of 37 and coming fresh from Barcelona B, though he was an untested manager, he would immediately overhaul the team, and his first move would absolutely shock the fans. Guardiola basically told 3 club icons that their time was up: Ronaldinho, Deco, and Samuel Eto'o. Ronaldinho and Deco were sold quickly, as both were the symbol of the lax atmosphere that Pep Guardiola wanted to eliminate. But Samuel Eto'o, well, that was complicated. Eto'o was coming off a frustrating season marred by injuries and rumors of disruptive behavior. While some saw him as a leader, others saw him as a loose cannon. Pep Guardiola initially believed his high-profile exit would send a message. However, the transfer market didn't cooperate, and although Guardiola initially tried to freeze him out of the club, Eto'o, instead of sulking, did something rare in modern football. He fought for his playing time. From the moment preseason began, Eto'o trained like a man possessed. Teammates later said he approached sessions with vengeance in his eyes. And although he and Pep would never really have a good relationship, that season Guardiola decided to give him the respect and the playing time that he deserved. Not only in the pitch, but also in the dressing room, things changed fast. Players had to be on time, meals were eaten together, diet was monitored, and even off-field behavior was scrutinized. Every session was intense, every tactical drill rehearsed was automatic, and the easygoing, celebrity-driven environment of the later years in the Rijkaard era were gone. Under this, Xavi and Iniesta thrived. The precise positional play only amplified their technical ability. Thierry Henry, who initially struggled at Barcelona, reinvented himself as not only a wide forward, but also one who pressed and worked for the team. And Samuel Eto'o, that season he scored 30 league goals, ending the season with 43 goal contributions in 52 matches, Barcelona's top goal scorer in the league. Whatever personal friction existed between him and Guardiola, the results made it impossible to drop him. That season, they would humiliate Real Madrid 6-2 at the Bernabeu. In the Champions League final against United, Eto'o would score the opening goal just after 10 minutes, and by the end of the season, they would become the first Spanish team to ever win a treble. But under the champagne and the celebrations, Guardiola and Eto'o would never get along. Eto'o was outspoken and critical of Guardiola at times, and Guardiola in turn saw him as a potentially destabilizing force for the club in the long term. And in the summer of 2009, Guardiola made his decision. Despite Eto'o having arguably his best season ever in a Barcelona jersey, Samuel Eto'o was transferred out of the club and sent to Inter Milan, and that massive hole he left would be replaced by another massive name: Zlatan Ibrahimović. The idea seemed logical. Add a tall, powerful number 9 who could be the plan B whenever Barca's intricate tiki-taka stalled. After all, Ibrahimović had a reputation for scoring impossible goals. Plus, he wasn't just a striker. Zlatan in himself was a brand, a strong, acrobatic, and entertaining striker. On paper, it was an evolution, and that addition made the already mighty Barcelona look even scarier. However, the only thing was, they've never really played that way before, and really, they had no need to. In reality, the move would eventually be like oil and water. it wouldn't mix. When Zlatan was unveiled at Camp Nou, nearly 60,000 fans showed up. His arrival wasn't just a signing, it felt like a statement. And right from the get-go, Zlatan shined. He would score in his first 5 La Liga matches, setting a club record for debut scoring. His first few months also brought silverware, like the Spanish Super Cup, UEFA Super Cup, and the UEFA Club World Cup. Before Christmas, he already had 4 pieces of silverware under his belt. In his very first Clasico, Zlatan would score the game-winning goal, and later in the season, during the Champions League quarterfinal against Arsenal, he delivered them a ruthless brace in the Emirates. With Messi hitting new levels of consistency and Ibrahimović providing decisive firepower, it looked like Barcelona would be unstoppable. However, it could never fully synchronize. As the season wore on, Zlatan's integration began to unravel. Barcelona's attacking play was built on fluid interchange. In the past, Messi, Eto'o, and Henry constantly rotated positions. It was a trinity of movement, and that was only possible because of the way that Samuel Eto'o played. Zlatan, however, was a very different kind of striker. He's the kind of striker that thrives with the ball in his feet and thrives when the attack is revolved around him. And with a midfield as brilliant as Barcelona had, it was definitely possible. However, because of Messi's insane rise, Guardiola would slowly turn him into a false 9, a position that would come to briefly define that era. And because of this, the squad had to be reshaped a little bit, and this would force Zlatan from his usual 9 position to play more out wide. And that tactical sprain slowly morphed into personal tension. Zlatan would slowly refer to this shift in Barcelona's play, saying, "You bought a Ferrari, but you drive it like a Fiat." And Zlatan was highly vocal about his dislike to this shift. However, Guardiola, whose style often leaned towards more silent detachment rather than open confrontation, slowly began to distance himself from the Swedish striker. Zlatan would later recall that Pep simply stopped talking to him, leaving him isolated and uncertain of his place in the squad. Because of this, coming into the new year, Zlatan's production plummeted. After Christmas, he managed just 5 goals and 4 assists in 16 La Liga matches. For most, he would be in great form, but for his standards and his early season scoring spree, his output per 90 minutes dropped drastically. His touches were fewer, his movements were more disconnected, and at times he just looked unfamiliar in his new role. And the cruel irony of Zlatan's signing was this: the traits that made him unique, physical dominance, hold-up play, and strength in the box, were the exact traits that Barcelona signed him for, but halfway through the season would abandon completely. And this all brings us to the 2009 Champions League semi-final. This was a matchup dripping with narrative. Barca would face Inter Milan. This was Zlatan's former club, now led by José Mourinho. And at Inter, there was Samuel Eto'o, the man that Guardiola and Barcelona offloaded to sign Zlatan. And he was now the main man at Inter. And he was very much in great form. Over 2 legs, Mourinho delivered a tactical masterclass. Inter's compact defense suffocated Barcelona's rhythm, and their counterattacks exposed the spaces Barca left behind. And instead of shifting back to the way they played in the beginning of the season, Barcelona decided to stick it out. However, nothing was working. Zlatan's old club and the destination of their former striker would end up beating them 3-2 on aggregate. And after Barcelona's defeat, Ibrahimović would confront Guardiola, telling him, "You don't have balls." And maybe Zlatan was right, but also it was a pretty difficult decision. On one hand, you have Messi becoming the best he's ever been, and to make him play his best, you have to make him operate as a false 9. But then again, you also have Ibrahimović as a striker, and you could have used him in the same way that you used him in the season where you won all those early silverware. But one criticism about the early years of Pep Guardiola's management is that he was never a manager to switch his tactics or his style mid-match. Perhaps on paper, the 2009-10 season was a triumph. Barcelona stormed through La Liga with 99 points, a record at the time, even adding the Spanish Super Cup, UEFA Super Cup, and FIFA Club World Cup under their collection. But aside from the league, many of those trophies were earlier in the season before Guardiola decided to make such a drastic shift in his attack. And the trophies they did win were much lighter than the ones that they could have, as they were eliminated by Sevilla in the Copa del Rey round of 16. And the way that they lost in the Champions League semi-final really left a huge stain on that season. It's like going to a buffet, but the main highlight dishes are out of stock. The summer that followed led to the abrupt end of the Ibrahimović experiment. It was the costliest signing in Barcelona history up to that point, and its lifespan was brutally short. And what made it even worse was that it wasn't even necessary. If only Guardiola and Eto'o had gotten along, Barcelona may very well have won that Champions League as well. And although that was the biggest problem of that season, there were a few other scars that held them back. Andres Iniesta, whose brilliance illuminated the treble run, endured a fragmented campaign plagued by injuries and overshadowed by personal grief following the death of his close friend Daniel Jarque. They were still the best side in Spain, but in Europe, they had lost that aura of invincibility. Of course, the following season, Barcelona would sign one of my most favorite players ever, David Villa, to be their new striker. And they would be La Liga champions, win the Spanish Super Cup, and once more lift the Champions League trophy. Very close to winning another treble if not for a loss against Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey final. Looking back, the reasons that Barcelona failed to achieve 3 consecutive Champions League, a feat Real Madrid would later accomplish, are kind of nonsensical. They had the talent to do it. However, it really came down to ego and man management. Making transfers that weren't necessary, trying a new tactic and a new style, then going on to reverse it mid-season. Sure, that season did have its moments like Messi's insane Ballon d'Or breakout, but looking back on everything as a whole, that season was mostly awkward. A strange, unnecessary, and what-if moment in Barcelona history.